So, welcome to Life on Hard Mode with Pratik Karki. So, this is the first episode. Hello, world. I'm Pratik Karki, and I'm so excited because this is something I've wanted to do for a very long time. And the reason I named it Life on Hard Mode is because, that's kind of how I feel like my life is. It was never easy, but I really love the challenges and the struggles. And I'm a huge gamer. I've like completed games 100%, like Elden Ring or Dark Souls or, the original Super Mario Bros., the lost levels without any cheat codes or hints or anything like that. So it's really, full circle for me. So that being said, would love to get started. And this is the first episode, a pilot. There's no script, there's no BS. So essentially, I'm going to be talking from my heart, and I might stumble and fail along the way, but hopefully, you guys are a great audience and can cheer me on because I really also want to get good at this. I'm a good writer, but being able to articulate myself is something that I want to be really good at, and that includes, taking my thoughts and being able to like represent them really well without having any issues. So that being said, what I'd love to do today is sort of give you a good introduction. Once again, a welcome. And this is the first episode, aka the pilot. I'll introduce myself, talk about my background and what I work on, what I've been doing with Anthromind, who I am, and answer all of your questions. So, hello, I'm Pratik. That's a really good picture of me. But this is Friday evening, and I am, not as well kept as I was then. So, let me give you a bit of an introduction of who I am. I grew up in Nepal, and I'm somebody who was always very curious by nature. Asked a million questions. I read so much when I was a kid. Family is, not too well off, and I come from a single parent household. But one thing we always used to do with my dad and my brother was we used to go to the library every weekend on a Saturday. And I used to pick up as many books as I could. So there were weeks when I was a kid in which I probably read around 25 to 30 books a week easily. Name any book, I've read it. When I was 12, I was rereading Lord of the Rings back to back, or Othello. A huge fan of the Harry Potter books. I never even watched the movies until later on, for example. And, a lot of different things, right? They were like, we had like an encyclopedia set. I used to read it entirely. And, it's just something that I've always been passionate about, which is reading, learning, exploring the world. So I grew up in Nepal. I went to school there, and always was like a very, very, very curious guy and very outspoken on top of that, which puts me at odds with a lot of Nepali schools because they do not like kids that ask a lot of questions. But nevertheless, I was always somebody who endeavored to do that. So after uh, after studying in Nepal, growing up there, I ended up going to school or my college in US, and that's where I started computer science. I didn't even know much about CS at that point. It was something that's completely new to me, but it honestly was really great because it wasn't something that was in my purview. I, did my A levels, did, the business accounting, economics route. So I thought I was going to major in economics or, get an MBA or whatever. So, there was like a bit of a business blood for me, but tech was something that I was not expecting to fall in love with. And so, I did that in college. A really great time. I really excelled there. And I graduated during COVID. But thankfully, I had a backup option, which was a master's program at the University of Iowa, which was a great program. Advanced human-computer interaction, high, advanced machine learning courses, all of that. And I was able to take that degree and get a job at Google. A very competitive program at Google called the Cloud Technical Residency. So you get 3 months boot camp, you learn cloud skills, get multiple certifications, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, here, talk to this executive for like a Fortune 50 company and, sell them on data and, consult with them essentially. So I did that for 3 years. San Francisco Bay Area, working with the top LLMs, bringing Gen AI before, ChatGPT even came out to companies in the sphere. We were piloting stuff in Bard very early on. Learned a lot over there. And most specifically, I learned that data in the post-training space, which is, I'm going to talk about it in a bit, but data after LLMs are trained, like after the backbone is trained using, transformer models, the data quality is pretty terrible, especially in like domains like medicine, legal, insurance, whatever you call it, where you need a lot of like high quality data. So it was my mission to build something in this space that addresses that issue. So that's when Anthromind came in. I met my co-founder at a Y Combinator networking event in San Francisco. And after talking, we were like, oh, we're in the same space. Let's found a company and let's do this. So I quit Google, did a company. I'm going to talk a little bit about like what it entails, like, launching your own company, visa, corporate structuring, all of that. And, raised our pre-seed that year itself in a couple of months. And we've been at it ever since. So Anthromind does post-training data for enterprises. So, a lot of our customers are like, Fortune 500 companies, very cutting edge tech companies, training frontier models. And what we do is we do evaluation data sets, post training, fine tuning, synthetic data, human data, and in a very, very optimized algorithmic way that is, not done anywhere else in the world, as far as I know. And that's been like an amazing, amazing journey. And I can't wait to share more about that. But today, what I'd really love to do, okay, before that, and the last thing, based in the Bay Area, I married with 2 cats and, have a lot of hobbies, including gaming, watching movies, reading. I like going surfing. I lift a lot. So, go to the gym quite a bit because that's the only thing that keeps me sane. So today we have a packed agenda. So the plan for today is normally I like having some positivity every Friday. And the Friday positivity for today, I think you'll like quite a bit. It's something that everybody needs. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the topic of the week, which is post-training for LLMs. Then I'm going to go to the meat of this section, which is the questions and answers. I've received 20 plus questions, I think 24 as we're speaking, and I've set aside like a handful of them to answer. They're really good questions. Thank you all. Keep them coming. You can comment on my LinkedIn, or what else can I do? You can comment on LinkedIn, or you can just DM them to me. I got a lot of messages on like my Instagram or Facebook, and even my emails, quite a bit of them. And finally, I like ending it with a section on what I've been reading, watching, or video games I've been playing, because it's something that is very exciting to talk about, and they're like amazing new movies or books that I like to give a shout out to every week if I can. All right, so Friday positivity. What is today's message? The message today, I thought about it a lot. And one thing that I really want to hammer home is the fact that everybody out there has their own individual agency. Individual agency is something that is, very hard to quantify and talk about. But I feel like there's a lot of structures today in today's world that prevents people from having a lot of good individual agency for themselves. You have social media that has a lot of like negative factors, like doom scrolling. You have envy, you have jealousy of other people. You feel like you're not making enough money. You feel like things are out of control, like prices, housing, whatever. And today, what I'd like to talk about is the fact that no matter what happens, you always have individual agency. Individual agency is something that nobody can take away from you. So you're always in charge of your own life. You as an individual can choose to do what you want. The fact that you have a choice, the fact that at the end of the day, no matter what you operate in, maybe you're in, outside the US, maybe you're trying to find a job there, maybe you're inside the US, maybe you're struggling at your current job, or you're unhappy with something. Maybe you have it all, but still you feel like there are certain structures that tie you down. At the end of the day, nobody can take your own choice from you or your own agency as an individual away from you. So no matter what your background is, you might feel like, oh, I'm like a brown person, I don't have much agency in today's world. The reality is you do quite a bit, and nobody can take that away from you. The example I love to take is from this extremely, extremely like inspirational person called Viktor Frankl. Oops, sorry, there's a typo over there. But Viktor was a Holocaust survivor, during World War II. And he was in 3 separate concentration camps. And he wrote about his experiences and talked about them quite a bit. So it's pretty crazy because Viktor Frankl always talked about like no matter if he was in a concentration camp and like they were killing people, he would still have his own individual agency. He was like, they can take my body, but they can never take what choices I have in my mind. And it is very inspirational because you're literally in one of the most terrible environments in the world. Like I don't think very few people in humanity can have ever been in the same situation that he was in, but he was able to like take that and be like, hey, these guys may take everything away from me, but they can never take my free will and my agency away from me. And that is so powerful that, so that means that no matter what circumstance you're in, you always have your own choices. So even if the world is against you, you always have your own agency. Always remember that. So that's today's Friday positivity. And let's go to the topic of the week, post-training for LLMs. So post-training for LLMs is something that is my primary focus, right? And people have asked me, what do you do? What is your focus? What does Anthromind even do? Why do you talk about like post-training and evals and all of these things? So I'd like to shine a little bit of a light on this area. What is post-training? What even are LLMs to begin with, right? LLMs are pretty much like the most sophisticated AI models for generation of text and via text images, but most importantly text. And they work on an expansion of the Monte Carlo method, or the Markov chain, by identifying what phrases in a previous document matter. So that's when the paper in 2017 came out called Attention is All You Need. And they identify what you need in order to have very accurate generative text and eventually images and videos and all of that, which you know about. So the process of training these models is called pre-training. You spend billions literally on GPUs. You do a lot of like rigorous testing and build very sophisticated algorithms. But anything, and so post-training, sorry, ChatGPT, when it gets released, is a pre-trained model that is a very sophisticated. So on GPT 4.5, for example, or DeepSeek R1. But anything done after that point, whether it's RLHF, synthetic fine-tuning, PPO, or any of these methods, fall under the domain of post-training. And why is it so important nowadays? The thing is, a pre-trained model is very good for general purpose use cases. You can ask it questions like, what time is it? Or like, how do I do my taxes or whatever. But in reality, the true magic lies in post-training. And that's where like the biggest bottlenecks are as well. So on the left, I have a few things, which is a paper that I think everybody should read called LLM Post-Training. The links are all in my Substack, by the way. So, watch this video, read the Substack post. All the sources are over there. You can read this paper over there. And this gives a very, very good primer on what post-training is. And I also have a lot of like images and everything over there. And here's like a very funny tweet on this, which is talks about like how pre-training is a very elegant science. It's done by mathematicians, they have like access over like distributed systems, like Hadoop and all of these things. And it's done in a titanic scale. However, post-training is where the wild, wild west of things is. You have like hyper parameters, and then you have like, tweaking the knob on certain things. And it's crazy, but like that's how it's done. But what it yields is like magical results. So what's the real life application of it? So what happens if you're like a medical enterprise in which you're trying to inject ChatGPT, or like a pre-trained LLM? Most of the time it's going to hallucinate because it's trained on such general purpose information. These niches or specific information, it doesn't have much knowledge about. Post-training are the techniques used to take the general foundation, if you see in fact number 1, and adapt the model for useful, safe, and goal-oriented behavior. So you have supervised fine-tuning, reinforcement learning through human feedback. These are like very well-known techniques, and that's where like a lot of magic lies. That's how you bring down the hallucination rates, how you make it trustworthy, how you have accuracy and very good predictions. The second fact about post-training is that it addresses pre-trained LLM gaps. So, by training on instruction type data, preference data, domain-specific data, or even unsupervised or self-feedback loops, the results are like insane. I keep on talking about like our medical customers and how how we are able to optimize their post-training by using a lot of these techniques. And you're getting from like 4.2% hallucinations to like 0.001% hallucinations, which is critical in a domain like medical. And they're able to do things that were like never thought possible. And it is using a lot of these different techniques. And the last fact is that recent work shows that post-training data induces measurable changes in the model parameter structure and scaling behavior, which means that with great post-training techniques, you're able to like change the parameters of the model themselves and do it in such a scalable fashion that it really, really does make work autonomized in a very, very great way that was never thought possible. So, 10 years from now, when, rocket ships are taking humans to Mars, guess what? It's going to be through LLMs that are post-trained to the techniques we do. That's why the groundwork that we're laying out right now is so important for the future. And if every single domain, every single industry can have the best post-training data, whether it is through evaluation data sets or synthetic data sets created, or even like human data that are labeled by PhD experts, these techniques are going to evolve in such a way that you're going to have weaker LLMs that are like guiding the world's most super intelligent AIs in the world, and having them sort of align to the mission. The mission could be solving world hunger, curing cancer, taking humans to Mars. Who knows what it is? But that is the true end goal. Anthromind is the mind behind, is like the mind that understands these super intelligent AIs, and that is what the future is. All right, so let's go to the most exciting part, and the part that where a lot of folks have asked questions about, and where you've given a lot of inputs. So first of all, thank you so much for your questions. It is truly inspiring seeing all of these questions come to play, and I'm very, very excited to answer all of them. And these are questions people posted on LinkedIn or X, or DM me directly on like Facebook or my email. So thank you so much for it. Keep them coming, because we're going to be doing this every week, and I'll answer every single question. I'm even going to set up a voicemail box so that you can send your questions as a voicemail. Look forward to that in the next week, or I'll send an email. But let's go to the first question. This was asked, I believe, on LinkedIn. By the way, all of the questions are anonymized. A lot of people ask, to be anonymous. Pertaining to their requests, we're going to keep it anonymous. I believe this one was asked on LinkedIn, and the insights are on founder-led sales. So this is a very important question, especially for like aspiring founders. So here's my like 2 cents on it, right? So one of the first books I read when I started my entrepreneurial journey was Founding Sales by Peter Kazani. And I think I'm seeing if I have a copy of it right now that I can show. It might be elsewhere. But it's in my bookshelf someplace, one of the first books I bought, and it's been amazing. So what is founder-led sales, right? I think a lot of people have this impression that, entrepreneurship is build a product, hire salespeople, they use their sales magic. But it doesn't work that way, because here's why. So building a product inherently relies on talking to customers. If you don't know how to talk to customers, if you cannot talk to customers, if you cannot understand their pain, then guess what? You'll never have product market fit. There are like founders, like the founder of Gamma, or founders of a Wiz. They talk about this quite a bit. Before even having a product, they were selling customers on the vision. They were selling customers based on their pain points and understanding what they want. So that is what founder-led sales is. And the axiom is that you should not even hire a salesperson until you have like, $10 million of revenue. Because, until that point, the founder has to go through the pain themselves and understand it, so that, and then be able to hand it off to a team when they cannot do it anymore. So how I do founder-led sales is really much based on Founding Sales by Peter Kazani. And there's a lot of different things I'd recommend reading the book, but a lot of insights come with being able to identify the pain points, reaching out to customers directly and being like, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm the founder of so-and-so. Here's my humble background, and here's why I'm so passionate about this, and why I'm the person to help you out. And that really comes off great to people who are being sold to, because you're not just another salesperson. You're like somebody who is crazy obsessed about this, even though they have a startup. They can solve your problem for you. And as a founder, it's great for you because you are in the dirt and grime, and you're learning from the customers firsthand. You're building a playbook, you're understanding the pain points, you really know what's going wrong. So every single customer, guess what? I'm the seller, I'm the consultant, I am the person who is there developing the solution for them. And I think we'll do that until we get to, even past like $10 million ARR. And it is so important to do that. So my insights on this so far are like, first thing is just be ready to listen. Find people who have the pain. If you're selling a payroll solution, find people who have the pain, people who are complaining about like other payroll solutions or like something specific. Figure out if they have that pain and why you're the right person. Approach them humbly, and you're gonna have to deal in numbers. Don't just spam Apollo and like send 10,000 emails a day. Figure out exactly who wants it. Come to them very humbly and be like, hey, I'm so and so. Here's my vision and my solution, and this is what I want to help you with. And a lot of people are receptive to that. And based on that, you can just be like, hey, we're working with so and so customers. We're looking for a design partner. Do you want to be a design partner? And that opens a lot of doors for you. And as you get the project done, as you sell them a SaaS subscription, as you get feedback from them and you talk to them, you understand what they want from the product and what is their propensity to pay. And that leads a really powerful framework for when you actually scale up a company, you raise seed capital, and you're able to get to the next level. So those are my insights. I do have a great Substack on it, shameless plug. I can put that in my post that goes out as well, but that is one of my key insights over here. And happy to talk one-on-one. My calendar is always open to folks, so you can always find some time with me and chat. So another question I get quite a bit. This one is, I think quite a few people ask this. I think Y Combinator's deadline just passed. It was on November 10th or something. And the question that people ask me is, should I apply for Y Combinator? And my answer is always hell yes, you should. I mean, look, I applied to Y Combinator. We applied when we first incorporated the company. Unfortunately, we didn't get in because it's very competitive. It's like a 1% acceptance rate, and had the interviews and everything, but just didn't get in. And that's not a big deal because we were able to get pre-seed funding from a different venture capital firm, Right Side Capital Management, a little bit afterwards. So we're fine with it. So the reason Y Combinator is so good is because of the network, and plus you're essentially like a pressure cooker, right? You have 100 other companies, you learn from each other, you sell to each other, and you're able to learn so much and accelerate your process. So Y Combinator is the true accelerator. Is it the only one you should apply to? No, apply anywhere you can. But even if you have an idea, if you have a prototype, you have one paying customer, please apply to Y Combinator. At the very least, it'll be a good exercise for you to talk through your vision, be very vocal about it, and do not waste time on very beautiful visuals or something like that for your pitch deck or pitch video. Just speak from the heart, identify the problem, identify why you're the right person to do it, and you'll be fine. So that's my advice. Please apply. If you want referrals, I do know a few people, or if you want me to review your application, I can review that as well. But just reach out to me. And oh, by the way, while I'm on the topic, if you reach out to somebody like me, please do not waste your time. Do not be like, hi, and nothing else. Say who you are, what you want, and if you want to attach a resource or ask the question, ask it right over then. Do not ask one question at a time. Ask all of your questions. Do not just be like, hi, Pratik, do you have time for a call? And I'm like, I don't have time for a call. Ask me what it is. If it is something important, then I can hop on the call. Please just be mindful of that. You have to be valuable and meet people midway if you're asking for advice. So if you want to apply to Y Combinator, don't be like, hi Pratik, should I apply to Y Combinator? Hi Pratik, here's my application to Y Combinator. Do you mind reviewing it? And I'll review it whenever I get time. But I do not like when people just say hi, or ask for a call for no reason. I'm like, what do you want? And just give it to me. I can think about it quickly. All right, tangent aside, let's go to the next question. What is something about LLMs that most people misunderstand? So this is a very, very deep question, right? So LLMs are very interesting because I mentioned the methods, right? The crazy thing is even the video LLMs or the image LLMs are all based on the basic technology, which is called the Markov chain. Markov chain is a very interesting tech. It was developed 100 years ago, I believe. And it's how you can use text from a book and be able to do something like a DFA or NFA if you've ever taken autonomous systems and computer science, where you move from a Turing machine from one state to another. So essentially it's its own Turing machine. And that's what, if you can, read the last sentence of a book, it can predict what the next word can be surprisingly well. And the crazy thing is there's a bottleneck to this, in which you need to read a whole book just to understand the next thing. Because of that, predictions became pretty difficult to scale up. But what the 2017 paper called Attention is All You Need identified is you only need to figure out what are the words that really matter in that text, and you can identify the next word to surprising accuracy. You went from having to ingest an entire book just to predict the next token to identifying a small subset of the book and being able to identify the token to surprisingly crazy good accuracy. So that's what led to the explosion of LLMs. And, that's what causes, it to generate images as well. Images are actually based on like text tokens. It's pretty crazy because the images that you see generated by Sora and everything actually have an underlying text sort of matrix to visualize them. So what do people misunderstand about LLMs? There's quite a few things, right? One thing I already mentioned is that pre-training is done on such vast data sets. They're really good for general purpose things, but for specific things, post-training is where most importance is. And specifically in post-training, and to talk about what Anthromind does quite a bit, you need the best quality evaluations and evaluation data sets to understand if your LLMs in production are doing what you want it to do. You want experts to vet it, specifically domain experts. That's why companies like Scale and Mercer are so big right now. And we also do this in Anthromind, which is pair the correct experts with the correct workflows. So if you're doing work in the medical domain, you're a medical enterprise. You do work with medical experts who are like labeling the text, reasoning with the models, and that's what makes it actually accurate. Companies that don't do that, like the legacy enterprises, that's why you see like articles like the MIT one where like 95% of LLM projects fail. If you're in the in enterprises trying to adopt AI and not seeing the results you want, talk to me, because trust me, post training, I provide really great consultation to enterprises. No strings attached, because it's not a zero sum game. You want every single company in the world to be able to use LLMs, because that will really, really help accelerate human development. There could be a future in which 5 years from now we have cured cancer, because so much of the work that is tedious and very hard and needed a lot of experts to do are offloaded onto AI, so humans can do like the very large parts of it that are like just the bottlenecks, right? And that really accelerates the development. So it's not just because you want the AI bubble to grow just because it can grow, but in fact the total sum of like think of like a GDP, but for like humanity, which is like the total sum of things we can do, will truly be accelerated because of this tech. Like this is like our industrial revolution, but it's an AI revolution. Industrial revolution took the world from, the world before that was just warring states, right? You conquered another area and stole their resources, and they conquered you, and they stole your resources. A zero-sum game. Industrial revolution made it so that the essentially the amount of production you could do like exploded such a bit. Then internet came, that exploded on a level, and now you have LLMs, which makes it so that the gross sum of all the product that you can do has exploded so much that if we do not reliably have LLMs in our production, then we are like doing a disservice to humanity as a whole. I wouldn't say as a radical take, but it's something that is the truth, and we should accelerate enterprises adopting AI. Otherwise, we're going to fall behind from our true potential, right? So, what does my day to day look like? So, this is a little less philosophical and all that. This is more like to the point, right? My day to day is very, very interesting. You might see me post on LinkedIn and X quite a bit, and I'm not just spending my entire day scrolling them. Actually, I spend a lot of time on Sunday planning it out. I choose the themes, I read papers on Sunday, or read my books and plan out the week. And so I have a lot of things scheduled. I do a lot of like ad hoc stuff, like if a new paper comes out or some news article comes out, then I'll talk about it quickly. But my day to day actually looks a lot like I'm doing a lot of deep learning or deep work. I'm not spending a lot of time stuck in meetings. I do have meetings with customers, but I try to avoid internal meetings quite a bit, because it's a time sink, and a lot of times you're not actually doing anything productive in them. So my day to day looks like a lot of research, a lot of looking at pain qualified customer segments, being able to target them and talk to them, doing research in areas that we're operating at with our current customers. Our customers are in like healthcare, fintech, media, some SaaS solutions, edtech, looking at their solutions, devising like ways that we could work with them and how we can optimize our current strategies. We have a lot of partners and everything. We have a lot of like upcoming projects and all of that. So my day to day is very different. I follow people like Naval Ravikant who preach systems in which, instead of like booking your time and being like, oh, I'm gonna like 7 to 8 p.m. I'm gonna read a book or something. I do things like, if on a Wednesday morning I feel like reading all about AGI or in the browser use case or something like that, then I'm going to spend 3 hours reading about it. And I think that's been really productive, instead of like, I used to do the thing of like making blocks on my calendar, but I found it more and more valuable to find something I'm super curious about and spend 3 hours working on it nonstop because I have that curiosity then. And that goes a really long way versus, being like, oh, I'm going to force myself to spend 2 hours responding to emails or, reading X book. If I need to read a book, if I need to read a paper, I'll do it right then and there. And it's more like the curiosity that drives me. I do have unavoidable customer meetings and everything, but it's necessary. I want to get to a point where I have as few meetings as possible because a lot of our work can be done autonomized manner. So that's my end goal. But my day to day is pretty busy. I work 7 days a week, but it's not like in an extremely, time blocked fashion. I do like to start off my day doing something extremely productive, going to the gym, going for a run or something like that. Normally, it's like I start my day with a workout because you do the most productive thing you can. Your body feels great, and that sets the tone for the rest of the day. All right, what advice do you have for international founders and visa stuff like F1, H1B? Got this question a lot from a lot of different people, and it's the first thing people say is like, "Oh, how can I do a startup?" or like, "How do I do this?" I'm in like X visa status, and it's an interesting question, but my perspective on this might be hopefully is something that you can take to heart because I started off the segment saying that you always have individual agency, and it's still true when you are on a visa status. So when I started my company, I was at the tail end of my F1 status, STEM OPT, 3 years after graduating college, and unfortunately, I didn't get my H1B. And looking back, it ended up being the best thing that could have happened to me. I went through the H1B lottery 4 times, didn't get in a single time. And it's pretty crazy looking back at it because I thought my time in the US was over. I did not want to leave here. I had the option to go to Canada, but like the wages there suck. It's like less than half of what I make in the US, and taxes are crazy high. And I have not a lot of good things to say about like non-American countries because they suck in general, right? In terms of wages, tech life, all of that. When you're so deeply entrenched in like Silicon Valley, getting out of that and being pushed into some area that you don't want to go to is like not great at all. And it's you want to be where the innovation is great. And on top of that, you have like amazing tax benefits in the US, amazing wages and people and opportunities you'd get nowhere else. And I stand by that fact. A lot of people talk about like, oh, what about the tech scene in like London or something? And I'm like, just get out of there, man. Come to San Francisco, at least be in the US in like one of these hubs, Austin, Texas, or Seattle or whatever, because you're wasting your time and your life otherwise. So, tangent aside, what can you do if you're in one of these visa statuses? Everybody's circumstances is different. But what I can say is, I was in my F1, I had an idea, we built MVP, and was able to like launch it and get my O1 visa quickly. I have a whole guide on my O1 visa. It's on my Substack. If you go to pratikkarki.substack.com, you'll find it very quickly. So it is very doable to do. Like it is very doable. You just need to plan out things properly. Get all your documentation in order. My advice to you is, look, you don't need permission to build your own MVP. People are like, oh yeah, what like I've heard people be like, oh, how do I? And this is not just about like a startup, right? It could be a lot of things. Like you want to start your own YouTube channel or your own podcast, like what I'm doing. People are like, oh, I'll start something after I get my green card, and I'm like, just start it, man. Like you don't need a permission. Like, and somebody who's like, oh, should I start a YouTube channel? I cannot monetize it yet. Do you know how hard it is to monetize? Do you know how hard it is to get like thousands of people watching your videos or like tens of thousands? Because that's the bar to monetize. So it takes a really long time to get to this place. It takes a really long time to develop an MVP, which you can do nowadays very quickly on Cursor or something like that, and launch it and get a few users. They don't even need to be paid, if you're worried about like visa stuff. But like, it's nothing is stopping you from forming an LLC, whether it is with a friend who's a green card holder or something. Also, I'm not a lawyer, so do not take any of this like literally. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of options. You just have to be smart about it. Do your own research. Happy to help out folks here. Just come to me with your questions. I'm happy to answer them. And But just don't reach out to me saying like, "Hey, Pratik, do you have time for a call?" I'm like, "No, I do not have time for a call. Just ask me a question, and then I can decide." And don't be like, send me a message saying like, "Hi, Pratik." It's like one of the worst things you can do. Say hi and tell me what you want, and in a very straightforward manner. No 10 paragraph blocks. Just 1-2 sentences. If we can't explain your question, then maybe you should just find a way to say it very shortly. So that being said, figure out your options. Um, if you want to launch something, launch it. Nothing is stopping you from building something in Cursor or launching a YouTube channel and doing all of these things. And speak to a lawyer if you're very, very like worried about stuff. But normally, there's a lot of like great leniency in the US when it comes to launching your own company. The recent rulings made it so that you can be on H-1B and work at your own company, because you can transfer your H-1B over there. There's a lot of different options like that. O1 visas, E2. There's a lot of things. So figure it out. But the main thing is like you should not feel like you are trapped or you need to wait for the next step. People always say like, "Oh, I'll start a business when I'm like XYZ," and guess what? That XYZ will never come. You might always be waiting forever. So, if you want to do something, you have an idea, you've already launched something, just go for it. And, happy to help out folks along the way. All right. This is a good one, right? How do you deal with rejection in sales or fundraising? And I felt this a lot, and it's rejection is not something that I'm like new to. Like since I was in college, I probably applied to like Google like 4 or 5 times before I got in, like internships, job after college. Finally got an offer over there. So it's not like most people like do not get what they want very quickly, right? And it's always a numbers game. The reality is like competition is really high. Whether it's sales or fundraising, you just have to learn how to live with a no. You just have to be like, okay, if I'm going to raise like millions of dollars, I have to be ready to talk to like hundreds of people, and I'll finally get a deal. So that's just the reality of how it works. Same with sales, it's a numbers game. I've probably like had customer demos and reached out with like hundreds of people and reached out to like thousands, in fact. And these are very qualified folks that I was able to find who had the specific problem that I'm trying to solve. But anyway, it doesn't work out. Doesn't mean much, if there's an objection, you can log it into like your CRM system, being like, oh, it's not a good time yet, or like, oh, they went with like XYZ competitor. My advice to folks is think of it as a numbers game and build a thick skin. It's not easy. It's not easy hearing a no and everything, but over time you get used to it and you just move on. And there's a saying in sales, which is there's nothing called hope. There's no hope in sales. Everything is like either is or isn't. But you just keep on chipping away at it, and it's like chipping away at a dam, and eventually the dam breaks loose. You get a lot of things. It took us a lot of time to find our first few customers and raise our capital and all of that. But since then the momentum has been pretty strong. So think of it that way. Just keep on at it. Be very persistent. Most startups take like 10 years to get to that crazy unicorn status anyway. So not everything is like the Cursor of this world, which is like a $30 billion company. In 4 years, it doesn't work out that way. They're the outliers. You need to be ready for working in the long haul and delay your gratification in a way. All right. Another question. A few people ask me this. Looks, I have like an idea for a business. Is that enough to raise capital with VCs or venture capital firms? Well, it really depends, right? The folks that normally raise with ideas are like either like amazingly smart people who were like machine learning leads at Meta or Nobel Prize winners, or some crazy like Harvard genius, or somebody who's like a repeat founder. And especially nowadays, since the cost of building an MVP or minimum viable product is so low, realistically, no, you need to build something. And ideas are great, but execution is where it's at. And please do not do something stupid like talk to a VC and have them sign an NDA for your idea. VCs get like hundreds of pitches a day, and they do not care about your idea. They probably heard your idea before. The only thing that matters is execution. It's easy to have an idea like Uber for cats or whatever, but executing it is where all the difference lies. Idea is like not even 1% of the actual business. So in the days where Cursor or Base 44 is common, just build something there quickly, validate it, find a few customers, go to Reddit, post about the thing, find a few beta users there. Like I found a lot of beta users on Reddit and stuff. So it's very easy to get feedback. You can even pay somebody to do the beta testing for you on Fiverr, for like a couple of bucks, like, find somebody in like India or something, and validate it, see if that's enough to raise with VCs. Then once you have a product, once you have some traction, then you can try to raise it with VCs. And it really depends, right? Uber for cats, probably hard to raise with VCs, right? But if it's like hardcore tech, you have like a niche that you're working on, like let's say you're like a supply specialist and you know something very specific about supply logistics, and you found like a few design partners or charter customers, and you build that and you're piloting it with them, then VCs will love that, even though you don't have like the X million ARR or whatever. So build something, even if it's rough, all of that, try to get it to customers, see if they want to use it, and take it from there and start talking to folks. But normally, an idea is not enough nowadays. Okay, got this question from a few folks, and indirectly also got it from a lot of folks. People are like, "Oh, Pratik, I really want to help you. What can I work on?" Or like, "Hey, Pratik, I really want to get into AI, and I'm very passionate about AI. What do I work on?" And I'm like, that is unfortunately up to you to decide. It's like nobody told me. There's no like guidebook that I followed to figure out what to do with Anthromind. A lot of it was based on research. A lot of it was based on experience. A lot of it was based on talking to like real life customers, and that's how you figure it out. You need to put in the hard work. If I tell you, oh, you should work on this XYZ in AI, then I don't need you anymore. I can just do it myself, right? Like if I know the problem, I can just go to Cursor and build it myself. Like, why do I need you? So if you are interested in AI, I mean, there are like specific things that are like very high level that, or like, intricate that I might have knowledge about. But if somebody comes to me and says like, oh, I want to build something on Cursor, Pratik, what do I work on? I'm like, I don't know, figure it out. Like, this is not my domain. If I knew exactly what folks wanted and what you should work on, I would just do that myself. Like, I don't need you. So a lot of value comes from initiatives should be started by you, not by somebody else. Like this is something I learned in Google, which is like, I could not go to my director and be like, oh, what is something cool I can do? My director would be like, figure it out. That's not my job to figure it out. So I actually did a lot of initiatives, right? I started a data analytics course for Google Cloud, like a certification thing, and developed it and launched it. That is something that I did. There's like a bunch of internal tools like for cloud migration, project management that I built. And a lot of it was just based on like stuff that people said they wanted, or people were like, oh, we need this. We have this pain thing, wish there was something like that. And that took a lot of hard work to find out. My director was just not like, oh, we need somebody to do XYZ, because if they knew that, they would just do it themselves, right? Because why the fuck would they give the project to anybody else like that? So that's the thing. If you want to figure out what to work on, do your research, validate it, and if it's like, let's say like a B2C tool or whatever, like, or it's like an app idea, there are a lot of ways to do research nowadays. Like, you go to TikTok and look at trends and search by most trending in that area. Let's say you want to build something in, I don't know, like creator content. Then there are like trends you can analyze, there are tools for that. You can use ChatGPT. You can filter by most viewed TikToks or Twitter posts on that topic and be able to ascertain something. But the main idea is like, if anybody could figure out what you're working on, what you want to work on, then it doesn't become that valuable. Putting in the groundwork is what makes it truly valuable. All right. This is another one I get a lot of. How can I get a job in AI or get a job with your company? Get this quite a bit. And as much as I like the idea of like, oh, I should ideally should be able to like hire anybody that I want to or whatever. Nowadays the competition is pretty high, right? For every person that is excited in AI, there are like 1,000 others like you. And best advice I can give you, and this is the advice that I'd use myself, I would not give you advice that I myself would not use. You cannot get a job in XYZ without proving your value. What does that mean? So if somebody says like, how do I get a job in AI or tech, it means that you cannot, just waltz in and cold apply and get it, because it's not that valuable for me. There are like thousands of others like you. And when it comes to outsourcing, probably like millions of others like you, to be very honest. I only deal with hard truths, right? That's why I call this podcast Life on Hard Mode, because there's no silver bullet. There's a lot of things you have to do in hard mode. What you coming on top of that, even with the difficulties of life, what is truly thrilling, right? And that's what really makes it feel like it's all worth it. If life was easy, I mean, life was easy for a lot of people in the past, right? Like, especially like think of like the boomers, like people that were born in like the 50s, 70s. Life was easier for them in a lot of respects. And a lot of them were like very unhappy because just because life is easier doesn't mean you are happier all of a sudden. Humans needs a challenge. So going back to the question, right? How can I get a job in AI or a job in a company like Anthromind? Prove your value, whatever it is. Nowadays, it's very easy to build something on Cursor or ChatGPT, or you can identify something. If I know somebody who was who, would like this goes back to this thing called permissionless value prop. What does that mean? That means without permission, you are showing your value to somebody else. There's somebody I know who's like a graphics designer. He went and created crazy graphic stuff for companies without asking their permission. Like, he'd be like, oh, here's this cool, like 30-second video I created of your company. What do you think about it? Would you hire me? And he got hired that way. And that is what proving value is. Does that mean like you should work for free? But that means you should show some value someplace, right? I had like a great person reach out to me over LinkedIn being like, hey, I'm so and so. I've done research in XYZ. Yeah, like the posts. I do not care about pay. I just want to work in a company like yours. And that is super valuable for me because, without permission, he's sharing all of this stuff and showing extreme value versus just like, oh, I'm interested in AI. Can I work in a company? I'm like, what does that mean? Like, are you truly valuable? Can I replace you with like millions of people in a second? No. Like, if you can show value, then you become really powerful, right? I would do the same advice, which is like if I'm reaching out to somebody, either build something that is applicable in their industry. Let's say you're a cybersecurity professional and you want to work in this like cutting edge AI startup that does cybersecurity stuff. Build something end to end, show it to them, be like, hey, this is my value. I'm super obsessed about it. And here's why I can fit in. And even if it's not a perfect match, more likely to at least consider you because you have shown value, even though it may not be a perfect match, and you've shown initiative. So do that. Be ready to do that. AI is like a gold mine, and people. Let me give you an example of the real gold rush that happened. In like 1849 in San Francisco. When they found gold over there. The real winners were not the people that like waited around asking people for jobs. They just packed their bags, got on a train, went to San Francisco, and started mining for gold, right? And that's just what it is. Take the initiative. Do not wait for others. Do not do the. Just figure out what you want to do, and make the first steps and be obsessed about it. So that's how you get a job in AI in a really good company. All right. So this one asked from a Nepali person, how did growing up in Nepal help you get to where you are today? Quite a few things there. So I spoke about in the intro who I am, how I grew up in Nepal, and all of this, right? So there are a few things here. Growing up in Nepal brought a lot of great things. So I'm a huge fan of the education system there. I mean, it does have its drawbacks, right? You are not allowed to be as outspoken or ask questions, but what it brought was a lot of discipline and a lot of hard work. I didn't think there are any like participation trophies. It was like from a young age, everybody was like, work hard, otherwise you're getting nowhere. My dad would be like, hey, if you don't work hard, if you don't study, guess what? It's you'll be going and plowing the fields. There's no like boo-hoo or whatever, like there was no like oh, there are like systems everything that at your that's not benefiting you. Like in the US, they do that quite a bit. They're like, oh, you're in XYZ, or like you're black or brown, you're gonna be oppressed by society. I'm like, I find that so stupid. Like Nepal, it was like never like that. It was like, you don't work hard, you're not gonna get where you want to be. It doesn't really matter. And I've always found that to be true. And in the US, especially where there's a lot of meritocracy, it's been an amazing pairing, right? In Nepal, at least, there's a lot of corruption and stuff. So it has made a lot of sense to live there because the opportunity scale is so much lower there, right? There's like literally like a billion times more opportunity, or even a trillion times more opportunity in the US. So I took those axioms, and I never was like, hey, I'm brown, like a South Asian guy, and I'm not gonna get what I want. It is more like in Nepal I learned like, hey, I just need to work hard and I'll get what I want to do. And that's where I've been. I've just never blamed anything on anybody. But it's like if I succeed, it'll be because of me. If I fail, it'll be because of me. It's nothing like that. So that's the main thing. There's quite a few things, right? I think I take a lot of like reverence for like authority a little bit. I mean, not like too much, but you know what I mean. Like you have a lot of respect for people before you, and you're able to like um, you know learn from your elders. I mean, you want to be like youthful and innovative, and be rebellious in a way, but you also want to like show a lot of respect for people who came before you and meet them where they are. That's another thing. So what else is there? I mean, there's a lot of other things when it comes to this personal life, right? Which is a life of discipline, eating well. The my family, is from like mountains in Nepal, and there's a lot of a ruggedness to that way of life, which I'm, very proud of and happy to adopt for myself. And finally, there's just a lot of like uniqueness. I think us Nepali people are very different from other ethnic groups in all over the world. We have our own identity. We have our own like individualism, and I'm a huge fan of that. So yeah, I think that's it. Always proud to be Nepali, and trying to inject my personality everywhere that I can. All right, what's the future for Anthromind? Loaded question over here. Quite a few things, and the short answer to that is kind of don't know, because the AI sphere is growing so much. We are learning every day, so I cannot tell you where reliably what we're going to be doing 2 years from now or 5 years from now. All I know is, whatever the future of AI and post training data and, domain expertise, we're going to be in the frontier of it. We already are in the frontier of it. The amount, like type of work we're doing, whether it's in the RLMs or, eval space or post training data, is cutting edge. See the work that we're doing with Deep Cogito. Deep Cogito is ours. They're like the creators of the best open source LLMs in the world right now, outperforming DeepSeek and all of that. Our frontier data was part of the reason why. And we work in like medical domain and fintech and all of that, and have done some crazy stuff. So whatever the future is, we're going to be in the frontier of it. And believe that the sky, there's no like ceiling for us, and we aim to be like the best in LLM adoption ever in the world. That is our true aim. So that might be the last question. All right, so that was the last question. So let's end off with my favorite segment, which is what have I been reading, watching, and playing. So I read 2 books in the last month. So the first thing is The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. Ben Horowitz is the co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz. Before that, he had his own company called OpsWorks, and he was part of Netscape. Amazing guy, right? And what I loved about this book is a lot of like self-help books, or like, management books or leadership books, all are about like how to not make mistakes, and, everything's going to be perfect. But this guy, he goes straight into it and is like, if you're a leader who does not feel like who does not get cold sweats because of stress and anxiety, then you're not gonna make it. So the things he talks about like are really hard. It's like, how he took his company from being valued at like less than $1 a share to, being sold for like $1 billion later to HP, and all of the work that went into it. It is amazing as a book, and it gave me a lot of inspiration, because same way I talk about playing life in hard mode, this guy played life in the hardest of modes, right? You think it's super easy, founder, CEO, billion-dollar company must be showing, but man, it's crazy. You can go public as a company and still be struggling, and still be like, few months away from like failure and having to lay off like hundreds of people. And he talks about all of it and how he was able to like take his principles and take it to succeed. I wish that I'm like 10% of the leader that Ben Horowitz is. That is, he is like a gold standard. The other book I read is The Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This is a sequel to the book Hyperion, which is an amazing book. I read it like last month, and immediately I was like, okay, I need to finish the series and read the second book. The first book is like in a very like interesting format. It's about like 7 travelers on a space pilgrimage to this planet called Hyperion, and they talk about the stories. It's sort of a riff off the Canterbury Tales, which is like a classic book written in like, I think 1500s or something like that. And the second book is a lot more different. It's a lot more sci-fi, but it talks about some interesting stuff like planet of AIs that have their own agenda with humanity. It is kind of interesting with the parallels to superintelligence because the planet of AIs, they are so advanced that humans cannot understand them. So there needs to be like lower levels of intelligence that sort of aligns them. Sort of what the future that we're headed towards is. The book is great, some crazy twists and amazing writing. So I'd recommend this if you're like a sci-fi fan. I watched Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. I'm a huge fan of Guillermo del Toro since Pan's Labyrinth, a great movie, or Shape of Water, or Hellboy 1 and 2. And this guy is just so good. Like in the recent years, his movies have gotten even better. Shape of Water, Nightmare Alley, um, the Pinocchio movie that came out a few years ago, and Frankenstein is probably the best movie of the year. Like amazing, like hands down. And in terms of games, I finished Hollow Knight Silk Song and I decided to play a retro game, Hotline Miami. It's not even retro, it came out like I think 10 years ago. And it's a really good game. Very difficult and amazing soundtrack and everything. I recommend everybody play this game, Hotline Miami 1 and 2, because of how fun and visceral they are. And the story is very, very deep. In fact, it doesn't seem like it is hard to piece together. But once you play both games and piece together the story, you'll find it like really amazing. All right. I think that's it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening in. Please remember to subscribe at pratikkarki.substack.com. I'll send updates there. It's a newsletter. I talk about like research, everything over there. And for future episodes, please comment questions on my LinkedIn or X, or message me directly on LinkedIn, X, Substack, um, like Facebook, Instagram, email, whatever you want. Thank you again. Thank you for joining. I would love some feedback as well, how I'm doing. Hopefully, I didn't bore you guys, but thank you and have a great weekend ahead.